Welcome everybody. We are in the final week of our mid-season reviews. This week, I am starting things off again, taking a look at Carlton and Richmond. It's been a bit of an up and down year for both clubs actually, and it's very interesting to see some things beneath the surface, underneath the stats, and especially considering their current ladder positions. So without any further ado, and without keeping you too long, my name is Ryan from AFL Access, and this is the Carlton and Richmond mid-season reviews. So let's start things out with Carlton. Now, Carlton have been a bit of an underwhelming, yet at times surprising package throughout the year. They finally were able to break their 100-point, or not getting to 100-point streak of something like 3 or 4 years at the start of the year. In fact, it was with their win against the Bulldogs. New recruit Sam Walsh happened to kick the kick to get over the 100 points and the sealer of the game, which was absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately, the Blues have also seen some downs with the sacking of their coach, Brendan Bolton. So there have been some highs and some lows and some real consistent footy for the most part from a club that is actually sitting in 18th position. But don't let that fool you. They are still sitting on 2 wins, 11 losses, and they surprisingly sit at 79%, which actually isn't too bad considering the amount of losses that they've had. It is a percentage that tells me that they are keeping their losses within a minimalist sort of margin, except for a couple of big losses here and there, and that they are winning decently when they do get the wins on the board. It should also be noted as well that Carlton, despite only having the 2 wins, have in fact actually scored more than 3 clubs in the competition, those being Gold Coast, Melbourne and St Kilda, which is quite surprising a statistic considering that they're on the bottom of the ladder. I will say this though, it is unsurprising that they are the most scored against team in the competition with the weakest defence. So how's their form going? Well, it should be noted that they have only won 1 game in the past 5 games, which was not the weekend just gone, but the weekend before, which happened to be the weekend or the week of Brendan Bolton's sacking. So as history dictates, normally when a coach is sacked, team gets on the winning board, and they were highly competitive against the Bulldogs. In fact, they were up at various stages throughout the game and were just a little bit unlucky to not get away with the win, but in saying that, the better team probably did actually win on the day. Their next 5 matches are against Fremantle Dockers at Optus Stadium, Melbourne Demons at the MCG, Sydney Swans at the SCG, Gold Coast Suns at Marvel Stadium, and the Adelaide Crows at the MCG. Now, of those next 5 games, I do actually see them potentially winning 2 of those. One of them most likely coming against the Suns at Marvel Stadium, and the other is a bit of a 50-50 against Melbourne, who themselves are not faring that well this year. If they do happen to win 1 of those, if not 2 of those, they will have bettered their record from last year, which does see them improving on their ledger on the wins board, but their percentage is already greatly better than what it was last year anyway, and it is clear to see anyone who is actually watching their matches that Carlton are a definitely improved side this year compared to last year. Paddy Cripps has definitely led the way for Carlton. In fact, he's probably been their most influential and best captain for over a decade now, since before Chris Judd came along really. I know Chris Judd came in and he set some standards, some high standards because of the kind of player that he was, but he never was the kind of player or the kind of person to show the kind of emotion that Paddy Cripps has clearly shown on the field this year in terms of his disappointment when coming from a game that he thinks they should have won, and he's not one to avoid giving a spray to his teammates or really showing the hurt and the pain to the fans because he thinks and feels that the club and the team should be performing better than they are. And to be perfectly honest, he's not alone. I do actually carry that sentiment as well. I've been riding on the Blues bandwagon all year, and I've been consistently saying, especially on Footy Rivals and any videos that I've had throughout the year, the power rankings, the reaction videos, so on and so forth, that Carlton are a better side than what their results are providing. I do still think that Brendan Bolton was possibly sacked a bit too early. However, in saying that, the game plan that they were playing with was just atrocious, and it didn't lend him any favours to winning games. So if he was the mastermind behind that game plan, he kind of laid his own bed, really, because it was never going to work. The Blues are a really interesting case this year because they have actually played some very good footy for large chunks of the year. There was a period there, probably for about 3 or 4 weeks leading up to Brendan Bolton's sacking, where the club was underperforming. But they were only underperforming for a month over the entire year. I mean, you can say that honourable losses, you can't just survive on honourable losses. And although I do agree with that, this is the first year that they've actually had honourable losses to fall back on. Last year was a dismal year by any stretch of the word. This year was clearly a step forward in their development. Some things weren't going right for them, but I definitely felt like things were moving forward. Now, they're a young team, so they took a couple of steps back for about a month, which was to be expected. There was 1 week in that month that they had a good game, I think against Hawthorn perhaps. But yeah, it's painful to watch the Blues and the Blues fans suffering this year, considering what the team is producing on the back of what is effectively an entire rebuild of the club. Now, when I say that, when Brendan Bolton came in 3 or 4 years ago, if you actually look at what they've done with the list, it's almost been like a new expansion club in terms of list turnover, without any real concessions given to the club like, say, Gold Coast and GWS were many years back. So their turnover and their turnaround is going to take longer than, say, 3 years to get competitive like GWS and Gold Coast. Although Gold Coast kind of became uncompetitive after their competitiveness. I think really the club was set up to fail, or at least the coach that was taking over the reins of Mick Malthouse was always set up to fail, given what was required as a turnover of the list. I would have been much more happy with the Blues, and the media would have been completely off the back of Brendan Bolton had they just said at the start of the year, this year is another development year. Doesn't matter the results. He will be coaching next year. And they would make a decision next year because the age profile of the list would still be young enough and good enough that a new coach could come in and immediately make an impact with that list profile. I feel like that call was made too early though, and it was only made because of media pressure as opposed to the right decision being made. But that's just my opinion. It's not everybody's opinion, and I can guarantee you not everyone will share that opinion, especially given the fact that the last 2 weeks the Blues have won and been super ultra competitive anyway. So we'll see where they are at the end of the year, but I do see them winning a few more games before the end of the year is done, and they will be on the up, and I think that they may not be on the bottom of the ladder, but I think they'll finish second last anyway, so it doesn't really matter. My grading for the Blues so far this year, it's a bit tricky. They were always suspect to fail. However, in my preseason predictions, I did predict them to be on about 8 wins by the end of the year. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, so they don't get a pass mark, but only just because I do see the improvement having been made, and I do see the players getting on board and actually showing a lot of emotion that they do want to win. It's not a team of players who don't know how to win, because if it was a team of players who didn't know how to win, they wouldn't care when they lost. And that speaks volumes of this group. So for me, they get a marking of a C- so far this year. They haven't reached their expectations, but they're not far below what their expectations were. Next up on our list is the Richmond Tigers, and I tell you what, this club has been very interesting to look and to watch and to analyse over the course of the year. When I did my preseason predictions and previews, I went a bit conservative with this team. Last year, I said that Richmond's style of play was unsustainable over a lengthy period of time, and what I meant by that was for 2017 and 2018, their ultra high contested way of winning, and high pressure footy was really great, and it wins you finals. It works brilliantly for finals. However, it's not sustainable over a long period of time, because the toll and the strain and the fatigue that it puts on players' bodies is too great. And I did specifically say that I thought that injuries would happen this year because of the fatigue that kind of play style puts on the players. That is happening now, and it's been happening since the start of the year. And they're not so much that there are a few soft tissue injuries and there are a few impact injuries, but they all kind of mount up, and this team has been depleted this year. I'm actually not sure if they had a full strength team, they would be competing much better. They may have gotten maybe one, maybe two more wins, but it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna change too much of their season. Their system is not as refined as what it was in previous years. Their small forwards are not performing in the way that they were, possibly because they've added a new tall into this system, and Jack Riewoldt has been out of that system, who is an absolute mastermind at bringing the ball to ground at whatever the cost. Yeah, Richmond. They do sit at 7 wins and 6 losses, so they are ahead of the ledger. Unfortunately, they have a percentage of 92%, so they have to get into the 8 on wins. They cannot equal wins with 8th position, because they will lose out. They have to win their way into finals, and they can't have any other results going their way. They have to win games now. The pressure is on, and unfortunately, the pressure is on in a really, really big way for this team to make finals as we look into their next 5 games. They have the Saints at Marvel Stadium, the Suns up at Metricon, GWS at the MCG, Port Adelaide at the MCG, and Collingwood at the MCG. And it should be noted that most of their games in the back half of the year are actually at the MCG. However, of those 5 games that I mentioned, I only have them guaranteed to win one of those, and that is against the Saints. I see the middle 3 games being 50-50 games that they might win or might lose. So they could come out of this next month either at 1 win or potentially 4 wins. It's really dependent on which Richmond team rocks up, and that is not a statement that you want to be saying about a team that is vying for another premiership tilt. Inconsistent footy teams are not good footy teams, and that's why I don't think they will make a run at the grand final this year. In fact, I don't have them making finals this year. I find that the team's too inconsistent, and I have them finishing 9th or 10th. I'm not 100% sure, but if they do finish 9th, then that would just be hilarious. Old memes aside. They have to have a lot of things go right from them from this point on, and as much as making finals is in their control, I have a feeling a lot of it is going to be out of their control as well, depending on how they're performing. So, it's not really much else can be said for Richmond this year. They are pretty much in the middle of the pack for every statistic you can think of. They're averaging around about the AFL averages for all of the statistics that you can think of. They're a pretty average team this year who are at times playing some really good football and at times playing some really ordinary football. It should also be noted that their form as of late is not great. They've only won 2 of their last 5 games. So they won a chunk of their games at the start of the year in the first sort of month to 2 months of footy. But over the last month and a half, they've not been very good, and I don't see that improving too much on the other side of the bye. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not a doom and gloom year for Richmond. Even though I do have them missing finals this year, I think if they can just focus on getting their players right for next year, then they can have a serious tilt again next year. But that decision needs to be made now at the bye to preserve their players for next year and hope that they don't get re-injured to be able to have interrupted pre-seasons. And don't get me wrong, they as a club will have these discussions, but I just hope that they're not too proud to not see the writing on the wall. Now, they may go through and assess, they're getting some players back, some players are just a little bit out of form, but we can get them back into form. We can actually make a serious tilt. And if they do make that decision, I hope they go full bang to be able to get there. But if after the first month or after the first 5 games, after seriously trying to get there and they just fall short, then it comes into preservation mode, reload for next year, because there's not much to be gained by trying to make finals and maybe making finals and then getting nowhere, and then having an interrupted preseason for a lot of your senior players, and then starting the following year, which is a year that you want to have a serious premiership tilt at, on the back foot. That's not where you want to be. Unfortunately, it kind of sounds like tanking, but it's not at the same time, because you're still trying to win games, but you're trying to do the best thing for the club. And the best thing for the club, if it's not winning a premiership this year, when the list is in a position to win a premiership this year and next year, then it should reload for next year. But that's my opinion. As for my grading of the Richmond Tigers this year, they have fallen short of their expectations, of media expectations, and of my expectations. Even though I said that I knew that they were going to be riddled with injuries this year and it would hamper them, I did still think that they would be vying for a top 4 spot, but as it stands, I don't even think they're going to make finals. So for me, this year has to be a bit of a D so far anyway. If they pick up and really bring back home, it's going to be a heck of a watch, because when the Tiger Army is going, the AFL is loving it, and it's a fantastic game to watch when the Tiger crowd is up and about. Those are my 2 reviews for this week, and my last 2 reviews for this week. My normal videos will proceed as of next week, and so will our normal proceedings, I guess. We are doing another watch party this Thursday. It is West Coast versus Essendon, so make sure you check that out. Same rough time. It's a slightly later starting games by about 20 minutes or so. Justin and I had a tremendous amount of fun being able to sit down and watch a footy with you guys last week, and hopefully we can go through and do that again and have just as many people talking about footy with us. It was absolutely brilliant to just sit back, relax and chill out and watch some footy with some mates. So that was really good. Guys, I'm going to leave you there. I feel like I'm rambling now. So if you did like the video, make sure you leave a big thumbs up, subscribe, and ring that bell to receive notifications when we do come out with new content. And make sure you join our Discord server. The link will be in the description below. It would be great to talk to you guys during footy matches, and especially in the competitive sense when Justin and I make our certainties and they go wrong. Anyway, thank you for watching, and as always, this has been your AFL Access.